So Quentin DuPont is a professor. Some of you know him. As you may also know that he's also a priest. So we asked him, no other person better than Quentin, to talk about shared values and shared values between business and society and purpose and careers. Quentin, with that, welcome. Thank you.
Come on up. Welcome, everyone. We have a panel with three panelists today. Thanks for sticking around for this last panel. I don't want to say anything bad about David Rubenstein, but I think we're saving the best for last. So this is a panel about shared value. Let me tell you a little bit about why Anil and Ricardo and the team asked me to do this, and then I'll turn it over to a panelist to tell us a little bit about what they do and how the theme for this panel speaks to them. So as Anil said, I'm a Jesuit priest here. I teach at MSB. I'm a faculty member here. I have a degree in finance and business economics. But what I study is the role of trust and cultural norms in financial decisions. And so this panel on shared values is really something that's very dear to my scholarship, but also something that's very important what I teach. I teach a class on finance and the common good for freshmen, first-year students when they first come in. And I'm about to start teaching in the Master's in Finance program on principled financial leadership. So I deal with values and the role of norms and culture and trust a lot, and so we'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. So let me turn it over to our panelists, and if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and what brings you to this panel this afternoon. Ellen, we'll start with you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Ellen McClain, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Europe United. I'll tell you about that in a second. But I am not a Georgetown graduate. I did go to another business school. But I'm here because Joe Baratta serves on Europe United's board, and he and others invited me today. So thank you very much for that. Europe United is a social enterprise. We are a national workforce development nonprofit, and we exist for the purpose of ending the opportunity divide in the United States. And the way we define the opportunity divide is in the 21 cities in which we serve, there are 3 million young adults with a high school diploma or a GED and a legal right to work in the United States. But there are significant barriers to them realizing their opportunity. Four-year college degree is not the path because it is expensive. And for many of the young people we serve, they have to work. And so we work on this divide. We say we work on both sides of the divide, appealing to corporations to support our mission and to provide internships for young adults so they can get some real work experience and ultimately a job. Over the years, we've served 45,000 young people in the United States, and we have an alumni base that is like a small college.
My name is Geof Rochester. I am so happy to be here. I'm an alum. I graduated from the business school in '81 when it was a much less well-known program. I was born in Barbados. I run a group called GRC. It's a consulting firm. We do three things. We do marketing, we do strategy work, we do impact investing and capital formation. We work with for-profits and not-for-profits. We work in several sectors. We work in ag and ag tech. We work in renewable energy. We work in healthcare and health tech. We've done work in fashion. And I'm here because a good friend of mine was nominated for an award, and I got to know Anil and the Baratta Center, and looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Hi, my name is Sherri Rossoff. I am here because one of my colleagues was unfortunately unable to attend. I'll just say that, Afsani Beshlas and the RockCreek group. We have a history of working with Georgetown on some very exciting projects, including one that we're engaged in right now in terms of using our data sets to help make available to the students and professors at Georgetown information that can help with sustainable investing. RockCreek is an asset management firm right here in Washington, D.C. We have offices in New York and Chicago as well. We manage about $17 billion in assets for institutional investors. So we spend our time working with endowments and foundations, corporate pension plans, state and local government plans, various treasurers in different states, helping them create their investment policy statements, managing their assets, doing reporting, and the whole soup to nuts asset management. So in connection with our impact investing, it's a long story and we'll get into it here, but we manage many portfolios that have impactful themes as well as more broadly integrating sustainability into our portfolios.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. As you can tell, this is quite an array of leaders, and this is something that we've seen all afternoon and that we see all the time on campus here, how great leaders come to this campus and come to address our campus community, much like these three wonderful panelists that we have here this afternoon. Now, last spring, we had one of our alums who's a leader in his business, the auto industry, come to speak to our students and our community. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford Motor Corporation, came talk to us, and I actually was one of two people who interviewed him that day. And I asked him about the things we talk about all the time at McDonough, how business does good and how business can have a positive impact for the world. And so I'd like to ask you the same question. How do you see business having a positive impact in the world with the business partners that you work with your organizations? How do you see the role of business as a place of doing good in the world and for the world? Ellen?
I would say the role of business is critical. And I'm thinking right now of 2019 when the Business Roundtable came out and talked about the role of corporations in society and the notion that there's more to it than maximizing shareholder value, and that customers matter, employees matter, suppliers matter, treating them fairly and ethically. The communities that businesses operate in matter. And we've seen this where we've operated. We've seen cities, Charlotte comes to mind, ranked really lowest on the economic mobility scale. And when we, together with business and other civic actors, said, when a corporation moves into a new location, rather than import talent, it's really important to see the talent that exists, that lives and has grown up in the neighborhoods and in the communities where corporations operate. And when you put your mind to it and get the right training to the right people and the right jobs, you can move the needle on economic mobility. This happened in Charlotte, moved from ranking 50th to 38th in just a matter of years. So jobs matter. The young people that we serve, we are unique in our work in that we focus on young adults 18 to 29. I personally think young adults in society need to have hope. And the students we serve, they don't want a handout. They want an opportunity and an opportunity to work and show what they can do. And corporations provide that.
That's great. Geof, how do you see business doing good? This is at the core of what you do, right, with your organization.
Yeah, I take a very historic view of this. I started my career with P&G. I was at Radisson. I was at Comcast. I was at Showtime. I ran marketing for World Wrestling. And before I started my consulting, I used to run marketing for a group called the Nature Conservancy, a nonprofit. So I went from selling Cheetos to working on climate change. And the thing I love today is now more than ever, and a lot of you know this, you're young people, now more than ever, this conversation is in the fabric of business, right? It used to be a little over here. The CEO might get in this conversation. The CEO and the foundation might get into this conversation, but now every C-suite I work with, this is the content and fabric of the conversation. And to her point, there's shareholder theory, there's stakeholder theory. This is an academic institution, and I would posit that there's been an over-reliance, overemphasis on shareholder theory. And the thing I don't think we talk about enough is when you are able to lead an organization and integrate purpose into the mission, not as an ancillary thing, not in competition to profit, but interwoven into the fabric of the institution, it's empowering, it brings joy, and it binds the employees to the employer in a way that no other topic I've seen can do. So I think we have a marvelous opportunity globally to unleash the power of capitalism for social good.
I think for RockCreek, for example, and my own background, the history of the firm is derived from the work that a lot of us did while we were at the World Bank. So the culture of the firm, is one that's global, and it's also grounded on some inclusion concepts as well as technical assistance to those in emerging and other markets that needed assistance to have their treasury function come to a certain level, have their different financial functions enhanced. So when I joined RockCreek 18 years ago, that was the foundation. It was a startup at that time, but that was the foundation that our firm is going to carry on that kind of work. Having said that, we are a fiduciary to our investors, meaning, among other things, that they are looking for performance from our investments to fund their pension plan, to help their pensioners, to make their endowments grow strong. So I'm sure we'll get into more of it, but something, not to be the naysayer, of course, on the panel, but there is a challenge as a fiduciary, and I'm sure most of you have follow the DOL and other regulatory work that has come out in recent years that has brought the tension between doing quote unquote the ESG and the impact work and the regulatory requirements for asset managers who are fiduciaries. So that is something that we grapple with, and we feel that you could have both. You can't be everything to everyone or every stakeholder, every client, but we can generate performance as well as do so in a manner that we think accomplishes greater goals in terms of sustainability and impactful investments.
So you each speak so powerfully about the not just the good that business does, but also the reality, the tension between positive social impact and financial performance, right? And having a sustainable organization and enabling your stakeholders to also be sustainable organizations, your partners, your clients, in a way that allows them to also continue to do good business, right? Maybe, we've been talking sort of at a 30,000 foot view here. Maybe a little more concretely, what are strategies that you have implemented or examples of navigating this tension between social impact and financial performance in concrete terms in your organization? And maybe, let's start with you, Sherri, and
Sure.
and move to Geof and Ellen.
Well, I'll start kind of on the investment side because there are many facets of that, right? So some of our portfolios, for example, will have embedded into them a theme that we think is in line with a client's ultimate goals. So for example, the themes that we feel are most impactful at the moment include areas like education, like internet access, like health and health tech. And some of these themes can be very, very broad because we manage assets for, as an example, for an organization that's very concerned about elderly and senior citizens. And one way of looking at their portfolio a little differently from maybe the way they had looked at it before was that there are pockets in this country of elderly Americans that do not have access to internet. So by able to focus some of their investments on those kinds of ventures, they were able to do a kind of win-win in that it furthered their mission, and it also provided excellent returns. So there's other examples also in education where internet access and availability of even computers and ed tech has been very impactful for those portfolios. And we have mostly voiced those kind of themes in the private space, be it private equity or some venture capital investments as well. So it's harder to some extent or more challenging to do that in the public side of things. And we find it more impactful at the moment to do so in our private portfolios.
I have a universal truth that my team has discovered across several different sectors. We advise a commodities trader, 50,000 trades a year, 60 different minerals and materials. We advise a fashion company, a couple $100 million fashion brand. Coming out of 2020 and COVID and supply disruption, coupled with both of them having to deal with European regs around carbon footprint, the quote-unquote ESG kind of initiative led to a much deeper rigor of analyzing, managing their supply chain. And out of that came unintended profitable and economic consequences. So the thing we're seeing across all of our businesses, some are clients, some businesses are having to be defensive with ESG or European regs. And what they're finding to their surprise is that there are actual financial benefits from going through the rigor of analyzing those supply chains.
For me, I just hate to capitulate to this notion of attention, because companies operate in a complex constellation of factors. You got to deal with regulation. You got to report on ESG if you want to do business in Europe. Those things are coming, and you have to deal with them. For the work we do, and we heard it on earlier panels, access to talent is a serious issue. Companies need skilled talent in order to advance their businesses. And so for us, we will speak into notions of return on investment. There is a cost to acquire talent. And we believe we have a solution that offers a return on investment. Like, you got to invest in talent. It's a factor. So what we do practically is advance what is now referred to as a skills-first talent movement. It wasn't that when we started at it 10 years ago, but it's the idea that not all jobs require a 4-year degree, and we have to think expansively about who is really talented, and it's worth the investment. When you invest in your employees, they will stay, they will grow, you will retain them, and there's a cost to not doing that. Separately, there's a cost to society. We are supported by philanthropy and earn revenue from corporations, and we go to the trouble of calculating what is the societal return on investment. For every dollar invested in Europe, it's a $2.46 return on investment. That's a conservative calculation. But what you could argue really is that the return on investment is infinite if the next best alternative for young people anywhere is to be imprisoned, is to be without work, with not being taxpayers. So this is how we think of it. I think it's all connected, and I'm reluctant to say there's a real tension there, although I understand what's in the headlines.
I do not give investment advice. This is not investment advice. I am not a registered investment advisor. But I challenge anybody in this room to show me an investment that gives you 160% return over a span of how long is this investment for? Like, you go from $1 to $2.60. That's over a year. That's over a couple of years.
Inside of 2 years.
Inside of 2 years.
Our program
that's
is
pretty
here.
good. That's a pretty nice rate of return, and a nice sharp ratio on that one, I would think. That's great. So, Ellen, you talked in particular about talent, acquiring talent, retaining talent. One of the conversations that I imagine you have as well, I've read in the news for the past couple of years is this kind of tension between how different generations view their work and the purpose of their work. And in particular, younger generations, the Gen Zs, the millennials, seem to be a lot more vocal, not just intent, but a lot more vocal about finding meaning and purpose, finding good in their work. But generations like my generation, maybe this is a little more in the background, a little less, up front. How have you guys encountered that? And how do you, if so, how do you navigate trying to get everybody on the team to pull together when sometimes that can create frictions? We've heard in the news a number of firms, in particular, in the tech sector, where this has created big tensions within the firm and people leaving their jobs and things like that. I'm thinking of Google in particular a couple of years ago. How do you guys encounter that? How do you deal with that as leaders in an organization? Geof, this seems to be something you would deal with quite a bit.
This topic cracks me up. I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I'm surrounded by 28-year-old millennial hipsters. And
it's like living on campus.
Yeah, exactly.
Only there are 20 here.
The dichotomy between how that generation processes the world and the role of job and employer. I came out in '81. I worked for P&G in sales. I had 125 accounts, 12 sales calls a day. And my big idea was that Folgers coffee should be delivered in a tea bag. And you should have seen the way my boss looked at me. And he's like, "Kids, shut up, go sell some coffee," right? That was then. Today, you'd have to listen to that kid, right? I laugh at the fact that, again, when I grew up, big company like Procter, thousands of employees, if the chairman sent a letter or the president sent a letter, to a physical letter, right, non-internet, pre-internet, to all the staff, you wouldn't think you could write them back. Trust me, today at Procter, if the president, CEO sends an email to all employees, kids are writing them back, right? So I think that it is a different dynamic. And I have some experience at Nature Conservancy. We went through DEI, we went through some real issues around diversity, the role of women in the business. And one of the smartest things we did was we deployed employee resource groups, ERGs, employee resource groups. So we created affinity groups by gender, by ethnicity, all kinds of different slices of the employee workforce. And it gave a voice. It was a structure to give a voice to bottoms-up employee perspective. That was one very solid idea. I was skeptical, but it worked. The other, we created a President's Council, and randomly every year we'd have a cohort of maybe 10, 15 people that had direct access to the president. So I've seen some good tactics. The one piece of advice I would give, because employee surveys become a part of that voice of the population, be careful what you wish for. So the advice we always give people, and the advice I've lived with, is if you're going to open the door for employee engagement, be careful and be prepared, because the worst thing you can do is not act on it, right? And not give it credence and value.
Yeah, we have 700 employees at Europe. 6% are baby boomers, 6% are Gen Z. So Gen Z has a very big share of voice, but actually not a big share yet of our workforce. But the way we've addressed culture, I thought it was really important to me as I was stepping into the CEO role to have explicit conversations about culture. So we decided to start a Culture Talks workshop, and I figured, let's try it once. And I had a feeling we would summon the energy and inspiration to go further. So by the time we were done, we had reached 270 of 700 employees.
Wow.
And we asked, how do you experience the culture? Because culture isn't the platitudes on the walls. It's how people experience it every day. And we set it up so we captured sentiment data and then had fun with ChatGPT to figure out, have it sort what the sentiment said. And it was mostly on point. And what we said about ourselves is that we need to do some work on feedback. and we are conflict avoidant. And you have to be okay addressing conflict directly. We operate in a complicated nexus of philanthropy and corporate America and young adults from low-income backgrounds with significant barriers to work, whether it's food, housing, clothing, transportation. And I often speak to our students and they say, what do I have in common with these corporate people? So in that nexus, we have to talk about culture. We have to respect diversity. It's in our DNA. And we have to be able to talk to each other. So we actively work on creating a culture of belonging without othering. So my belonging should not be at the expense of your othering. And it really does require a level of sensitivity and willingness to talk across sometimes really fundamental differences. So yeah, we work on that. And for me, what I want for our employees, I'm at the end of my career really, is that it's a beautiful thing to have work with dignity, to look back and say, I had my life's work and I contributed to something that is bigger than myself. And so to make that our culture, we make sure everybody understands what is our strategy, what is our work, and how do we go about it. It's not enough to love our mission, you have to actually love the work. And it takes a lot to recruit 4,500 young adults, train them inside of a year, place them in an internship, and ultimately a job. A lot has to go well to make that happen every year, and we need to work in harmony. So I understand why there's some skepticism, because there's a lot of ups and downs and volatility in hiring. And I think young people want to come out and say, is it going to be worth it for me to do this? Can I see a long-term path to my hopes and dreams? And so we work on trying to help people see a long-term path.
That's great. Sherri?
Well, the beginning of your question was, about what attracts, a new employee potentially to join. And I think, most cover letters or resumes do say, I'm interested in RockCreek because of the mission and the work that you do, and, the culture of the firm. So I would say 90% of letters start out with some affinity to kind of the work that we're engaged in and the ethos of the firm. I think, during COVID, we adopted a few things that I think have stood the test of time. So we started doing very informal surveys, if you will, nothing fancy, but we hadn't really done that before. And by having the data, we were able to really get some sentiment about different things. And it really gave us a better kind of insight into the pulse of what was going on we might not have known before, and that's a small team. The other things we started to do, and maybe some of it was because there were more Zooms and things, but we were able to make new people or the youngest people on the team have more of an ownership stake in different projects that we were working on. And I think that's something we've continued. Some of them are more serious than others. Some of them might be a pilot program or a task force, my two favorite kind of words, pilot programs and task forces, because it lets you be more nimble. And in this environment, in terms of our investments and also the culture of the firm, there needs to be some nimbleness, and we have to continually evolve and change the way we're doing things. And also with using a lot of the data work that we do, as well as some of the AI, has given us, I think, more insight, and people are very excited about it. And we're trying to promote more responsibility of the whole team, regardless of what role that they're in.
I want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end. So if you guys have questions, I'll invite you guys to just come up and line up next to the mic. But while people do that, let me ask you one last question on my end. One of the themes that's been running through the entire afternoon, but that also has been running through this entire conversation that we've been having, It's the theme of trust, right? So David earlier said, well, trust is everything. When you invest, you're entrusting your money to someone you don't know, and you got to trust that you can get your money back and things like that. There seems to be a decrease in trust in our society, trust in, in businesses, trust in organizations in general. In your work, trust is essential. How do you find a way to go against the grain on this, to kind of restore trust where maybe, we're at a deficit compared to where we were, a decade or two ago? Ellen?
Trust is everything. It's incredibly important, and it's at the institutional level, but it's also the one-to-one, the relationships. We work hard on just connection and interactives and the way we start a meeting, getting to know the human beings that you're working with is part of it. And then as an executive, being transparent sometimes when I don't really want to be, but, making sure people understand the strategy and be willing to explain, to share it even when I don't have all the answers. But to be able to say, this is where we are in the decision making. It's really critical to have those reps, those positive reps, because inevitably a challenge is going to come up. And you want to, when you know people and you trust them, you can get through the inevitable ups and downs.
Sherri?
Well, in the asset management world, I don't think a lot of asset managers have done a great job in being transparent about their activities, without getting into things about greenwashing and green bleaching and all these issues that have come up, and not necessarily only about sustainability issues, but maybe it's brought it more to a fore that there are so many, I think, problematic issues related to that industry. There's also problematic issues related to the regulation, in my personal view of the industry. So with that as a backdrop, I don't think the industry has done itself much favor in terms of gaining trust. So I think, my firm is a special place, and everybody that's there, I think, feels something different from maybe other firms that haven't tried to work very closely with partnering with our clients, partnering with our own team. So for example, the organizations that we support, and we really doubled down on it during COVID because it was a way for the team to really feel more impactful, more that they themselves were contributing to our community. So for example, Sasha Bruce is an organization in town that helps youth that are homeless in the DMV area, and we doubled down on our support of that. I became a member of the board, and the whole firm kind of got involved, and that was one example that we try to do the right thing when things are difficult. But I think trust, it may sound cliche, but we have to earn our clients' trust. They walk with their feet, they could go somewhere else, and I think especially in the age of consolidation of big financial services firms that offer maybe more commoditized product than a firm like my firm, it's a little different feel. It's more personalized, and we feel that hopefully addresses some of the industry issues.
Great. Geof?
I agree with her points about the headwinds around greenwashing and ESG, et cetera. I don't envy any CEO of a publicly traded company today. On the one hand, we know from the Edelman Trust Barometer that society is looking for more leadership from not-for-profits and for-profits versus media and government. So there's this expectation that CEOs have to step into from a leadership and a statesmanship standpoint. I hearken back to two moments in society here, Black Lives Matter and COVID actually, and Israel-Hamas. And these were three moments, and they don't all directly affect for-profit companies, but they were leadership challenges to, if you're running Georgetown University certainly, or UPenn, there were leadership challenges. I will tell you that when I think of the topic of trust, I think of values. And I think you can't talk about one without the other. And when we advise CEOs and organizations, we also talk about solidifying this conversation with the board solidifying this conversation with your employee group before you go outside, right? Because you can't talk about values and trust externally if there is an alignment internally, right, has been our experience. We literally will tell people, because we get calls from people saying, hey, do we talk about ESG? Do we pull it down from the website? Do we stop talking about DEI? Like folks are deer caught in the headlights nowadays. And our only advice is solidify your core, right? Go back to the basics and make sure, because the good news as a marketing guy is that this conversation is now filtrated to the brand. Gillette tried to talk about men years ago. They got hammered for inauthenticity. So this notion of the brand, the company, the trust you have with your different stakeholders, and then how you manifest that, because so many CMOs I know are trying to build it into the brand platform, will obviously ring hollow if you haven't done the spade work internally.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. If I just one point on that, I mean, for us, a respect for diversity and inclusion and equity, I know people struggle with that word, and it's a word that really does require some intellectual rigor and thought if you're going to go there. But when you get into commercializing movements or commercializing DEI, I think that's tricky territory. For us, it's about basic respect for human beings, for all of who they are, and we live that every day. It informs our mission, our strategy, and our way of being, but it definitely is not commercial. It's not marketing. It's just a way of being in the world that really respects people.
Thank you. We have time for one question. Please.
Hello, Michael DeSantis. I'm with MA IBP, International Business and Policy. And so my question, kind of about the workers you were talking about, I personally believe that, the reason why we're looking for companies to find our purpose is because we don't have purpose elsewhere. You mentioned trust. We don't have as much involvement in civic groups anymore. From, a Jesuit perspective, people aren't going to church as much. Do you, as business leaders, find it to be a problem, or a potential problem, if people find all of their purpose to be in their job? And what happens if they lose that job and they lose their purpose? What's the, solution, or is that something we're even thinking about?
I think about it all the time, and I share your take on it, that people are not as involved in religion and other organizations. And for those of us who work, we spend a lot of time at it. So it does stand to reason that you, for what you spend time on, you really want to have that sense of belonging. But I think it is a risk to be so attached, to have your identity attached strictly to what you do for a living, your job, your company. That is a concern, and it's not. My advice would be not to do that. I mean, there's a deeper level of understanding. And this is my favorite interview question. To what extent have you explored aspects of your own identity and how they inform, how you think, how you lead, how you manage? You need to explore that. And so when you get to the heart of the matter, then it won't be so attached to a particular company or job. But yet I think it is, again, I think people should love to come to work. There should be joy in the experience of it. You shouldn't come to work and have somebody punking you or some microaggression or this or that. It should be fun, and that's the kind of culture we're going for.
Well, I want to make sure also that the other panelists want to respond.
I think I just can talk about the industry that I know best, and a lot of the people that I work with, and are very defined by investment management and finance, but they also can be introspective about how to be effective as a person and as a leader, and if they had to change jobs or change firms, that could be in the cards. However, certain basic principles about to your point about how we look at investments, how we look at themes, how we look at people, how we look at transparency and data and the right way to deal with those things and the challenges, I think that's exciting, and to me it carries through whether or not, you have lots of other things going on. And for myself and a lot of my colleagues, we do that with the philanthropy work that we also do.
Geof?
I'm good.
Okay. Other question?
Good afternoon. Baghdad Aliyev, scholar from Kazakhstan. Dear speakers, my question is, do you think it is necessary to change, for example, the management system, the structure of organization, the reward system, taking into account the Generation Z will come to the market in the near future? We all know they are different. Thank you.
Big question.
I think that the management structure and the philosophy of management does need to evolve for that generation. And I haven't thought about this a lot, but the word that comes to mind is coaching versus in classic employer-employee relationship, which you'd have to be tricky with, which could be tricky. And then the other thing that comes to mind is that you have to provide more ongoing feedback, right? The traditional, like twice a year, once a year performance review is, I think, highly unsatisfactory for that generation. They're going to want more frequent feedback. And quite frankly, I think they're going to want the feedback to feel more like coaching than classic performance review and checking boxes.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would just add to this the idea that we have adopted a little bit reverse mentoring. So where as a new recruit, I was going to say, like a new analyst could be my mentor, and so that it gives you a little bit more insight into what is important for that person and of that age group. And I certainly could use help in certain things as well. So none of us kind of are perfect, and we're always trying to learn. So I think if we look at it, like what can we learn from each other, it's super helpful. And the elephant in the room is always like return to work and remote and all of that. While we may not agree with, with each other, we try to be transparent. So we are clear about our expectations about being in the office, which may be unpopular in the world. However, we have decided that as long as we're transparent about that, that's the best we can do. And even when we are transparent, it may not be what everyone wants to do, but at least they have heard how we view it and why we think it's important, because we expect every hire to be excellent at their job. The technical skills, if they don't, they will have that or they will learn that. It's a lot of these other skills that we're talking about related to, I don't say equity, but the impactful nature, sustainability features, just helping out in the kitchen to make sure that we're living up to our goal of not using the plastic. You have to be in the office with us to do that. And if you're not evaluated in the same way as someone who is rolling up their sleeves, helping with the non-plastic rules, and helping with organizing our meditation, which we learned here at Georgetown, by the way, through that program, and doing things like that. So it's really important. It's not soft skills. It's part of being a team player, and that is when we're all together.
I would just offer that I think the structure of an organization has more to do with what your business is and what your situation is. So certain situations call for greater centralization, others for decentralization. So it really is driven more in my mind by what the work is, what your opportunity is. But in terms of culture, I would say being democratic when it comes to access to information and knowledge and data about the business, so that wherever you are in an organization, you can maximize your understanding and your own initiative. So there shouldn't be competition on the basis of who hoards information and who doesn't. The more informed people can be, the better I think they can perform in an organization. So I would approach it that way. Structure is a different thing, I think.
Thank you. Sherri, Geof, Ellen, thank you so much for sharing so much value with us and sharing so much of the values you hold dear with us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for hanging in there.
All right, been quite an afternoon. It's my not so enviable distinction to actually bring this day to a close, and I'm standing between you and the reception. So a few things to close out. First of all, a bunch of thank yous to all of you and the speakers and the moderators for making this a wonderful day. David Rubenstein, the two CEOs we had, the three executives from the different industries, actually two of them finally, and then the three folks you just heard from. So a lot of thanks to them. Thanks to Joe, Ricardo, and many of our board members that are here today for inspiring not just today, but the last several months and making all of this a reality. Also for the Alumni Award that we will shortly announce at 6:30 in Fisher Hall. Several of the teams at Georgetown University worked behind the scenes. Joe Foyer, Daniela, Evans here, Joe Jasper's actually getting Fisher ready. Several of our student fellows. So I think we actually are engaging student fellows left and right. Delaney, Harika, Andrea, Alex, and a few others as well. Special thanks to the Dean's Office. The list is long today, MSB Marketing as well. And several of the faculty that have actually been involved in this today. So in terms of takeaways for today, so I think we'll actually write them up in the next few days. Our teams have all been taking notes, but as you all heard, a few things. So pearls of wisdom from David Rubenstein, several of them. And I'm going to read them because I wrote them in myself and I need my glasses for that. Can't stop investing in China, but be careful, right? So no decoupling on investing from China, at least not yet. And David believes that globalization is going to come back in 10 years or so. And when you say come back, it's not that it's ended and it's going to start again. It's actually happening, but it's going to go through a lull and come back. Tariffs aren't a smart thing, but they're happening. So we have, our government and political leaders to help us drive through that. Trust, you heard that throughout the day, is the base of investments, is the base of relationship, is the basis of purpose. All of that comes together. The US takes gold in terms of investing, right? US still takes gold. So it's a country with a lot of innovation, a lot of rule of law, structures in place, mechanism in place, risk management in place, so still is the leading target country for investments, but other countries are competing, emerging markets included, and of course that risk appetite drives that. And then David's few takeaways and advice for all of you, all of us as well. Work hard, don't think you're too smart. Convince others. I think talked a lot about the several bullet points of convincing others. He had 3 or 4 bullet points on that: communicate well, articulate, build relationships, all of that. Be humble. I think you saw how humble David was. After 30, 40 years of being a private equity leader, he was very down to earth. And I think one thing he said, not just this time, but last time as well, love what you do. Love what you do. We then heard Joe Amato and Bob Pragada talk about a series of things that they, as CEOs, are seeing and challenging. Clearly, global enterprise today is facing a lot of risks as governments and society jostle for the changes that we're seeing all through. So clearly a lot of uncertainty, chaos, and trust equations in the world that are difficult. I think interesting thing for me was Joe Amato's an investor in Jacobs. I didn't know that when I actually invited both of them together. But investors need to be on the ground. You can't invest from remote, and it's no longer you can pull strings and actually make things happen on the ground, knowledge on the ground, understanding whether you're an investor, whether you're private equity, whether you are running a company on the ground matters. Global, local, go together. Be global, act local. I think Joe Amato made the point that geopolitics and other risks actually trigger innovation, actually create solutions that actually later on help reveal in the future what the outcomes and rewards might be. I think we heard a lot about agility. I think the title of this panel was resilience, but we heard agility. Is that how you become resilient? entering markets, exiting markets. And agility comes from your management systems, your ability to decide, from your board, from your executive team. So, and that actually links to the last session as a way, in a sense that the systems drive the behavior of the organization. We then heard, the two executives. Actually, we were supposed to have Rich Wuberg as well from energy, but auto and food industries, both quite different. But like many other industries that are going through big changes around the world, either triggered by climate or geopolitics, or in the case of food and auto about sustainability as well, big changes, big different changes. Food, you heard Caroline talk about the responsibility to the farmers in Africa. Africa is an important source for the world. But in auto, it's actually minerals and technology that's the source as well. So a few takeaways. I didn't know that Denso gave QR code to society. Good, cheers to them. US companies, I think, have been embedding ESG voluntarily into their systems and into their incentives. We have very little regulation. We have more incentives than regulation in the US, but other countries are different. Lots of global pressures for these executives, the two industries, and then Sven chipped in with the energy industry as well. Lots of pressures on them from consumers, from technology, from regulations, and they have to be agile, as you heard from the previous one as well. Value chain relationships are really important. So I think despite all the technology in EVs or in food, sustainability, agronomics, and so on, the value chain is driven by relationships. I think that's, at least for me personally, that's a big takeaway. You can't AI away value chains and relationships, right? AI can't solve that. And then I think we heard a little bit of Africa throughout the day, a little bit, not a whole lot, but Africa as a continent and as a region, I think has a lot of things to offer, but issues as well. And these are issues on poverty, but now minerals and food source. And clearly the politics of Africa is very, I won't profess to know that I know Africa. It's a continent that actually has deserved a lot of attention from the IMF and others as well. You can expect to hear more about Africa in the next few years. AI, I think clearly front, left, and center. I was actually waiting when AI would be raised as a topic quite late in the day, I think because we all live AI. ChatGPT is how, Ricardo teaches you. No? Not quite. ChatGPT, actually we tried to frame these questions today for Dave Rubenstein on ChatGPT. They were half garbage, right? We actually have to go, throw them away and start afresh on a human set of questions. So we then heard Ellen, Geof, and Sherri talk about 3 different perspectives on how business and purpose come together. And you heard from David Rubenstein as well. His parting comments to all of us were, you can die a billionaire, but unhappy unless you have purpose in life, and actually that connects the dots. So a few things from here. Business as a responsibility to society. That's, I think, one of the things that Quentin started off with. And by the way, I think as we all heard multiple times during the day, business more trusted than government. Business more trusted than government, because business actually delivers on some of the promises as well. So the big vacuum that government is leaving, but business is, it's a fulfilling at least in some part. Capitalism plus common good, better than socialism, I think. So the ism thing is a question mark that is actually, it's in some ways tearing apart US and China. But capitalism plus common good, I think, can be a philosophical answer. Practical questions, of course, very deep ones there. You heard from Sherri about impact investing. Can you do good and do well at the same time? And not always, but there are ways to do it. And I think Ellen raised the question of ROI, from societal ROI to 60%. Wow. Okay, if we start measuring that way, but then goes back to the question of shareholder versus stakeholder. I think as Quentin, you talked about, Ricardo, you talk about in your book as well. And then I think the last thing I'd say on what we took away today is the notion of systems and culture that drive purpose and trust, right? I combined 4 complex words together: systems, culture, purpose, trust. 4 very complex words, but they actually all come together. So as I conclude, please stay tuned to the Baratta Center activities, our website, our social media. I mentioned a couple of things that Joe and I talked about earlier today that will likely come to you in the next couple of months as well in terms of tangible outcomes on some of the connection between what you learn in class, for at least the students here. I see some alumni here as well. But what you then connect to society, to your careers and to your employers as well. Just a few samplings. We are launching a new working group in November on cross-border trade and investing. So that'll be a mix of lawyers, industry executives, investors coming together, and this will be a mix of in-person and virtual, and we'll invite several of the faculty and students here as well. In December, we'll convene a roundtable on this topic that Quentin and the panelists discussed today on combining business and purpose, shared values, business for common good. We'll also, so we actually have been, in the Baratta Center, been tackling technology questions as well. So our marketing platform is finally almost ready. And we're launching a series of blog series that are more interactive and able to communicate to you some of the things that we've been talking about, not necessarily these big events, but some smaller discussions as well. We just finished a case study with the help of Siemens Energy on the hydrogen energy transition in the US and globally. It's being used in one class with Mike Ryan, and potentially a few other classes in the spring as well. So we'll publish that and put that on the website as well. And one of the few case studies that Georgetown writes that actually become leading in terms of connecting the dots on topics that are of interest to all of you. Now, I think just to conclude, I'd like to invite all of you to the Fisher for the next 1 hour. It's a cocktail reception, so get to meet the board members, the speakers, and I think we talked today about reverse mentoring as well. All of you Gen Z, as Ellen said, have a lot to contribute to the previous generation that can actually shape the world for the future. So we'll actually convene on the 4th floor, Fisher Colloquium. We'll announce the winners of the first Georgetown Baratta Center Impact Award. So what we talked about in the last panel and all day long, actually we put that together in a series of, over the last 6 months, we've been canvassing clubs, alumni clubs around the world, and we have 5 winners that we'll announce today. So I think we have 4 of the 5 winners here in person: Augustine, Alexandra, Vikram, and who am I forgetting? Caroline. Thank you. And then Devi couldn't make it, but she has one of her students, Rachel, who's going to receive the award. So we'll announce them more formally on the 4th floor in a few minutes. And I think that's about it. So I'm not standing between you and drinks anymore. Thank you.